Today we are making thermophilic heirloom yogurts. That is our Greek and Bulgarian cultures. They're two of our favorites and also two of our best sellers. These cultures are incubated, which means they're held at warm temperatures for about 8 hours. We can do this with our Broad and Taylor proofer, and we can also do this with our Your Cuisine maker. Because they're incubated, that means they come out nice and thick. Even better, because they're heirloom cultures, that means you can make them forever and ever as long as you care for them in a way we're about to show you. And the best part about making yogurts at home is you know what's in it. And one more thing, it's good for your gut and it's a great source of protein. So let's get into it. The first step in making our thermophilic heirloom cultures is to activate our starter. So let's do that. I'm going to start with 1 cup of milk into my jar. I like to measure with the jar. Remember, you can use a measuring cup if you'd like, but the jars have measurements on it and we like to save ourselves the dishes. There's our 1 cup of milk. We're going to put that in a pot and we're going to heat it to 160 degrees. Remember, when you're heating it, to heat it slowly. The faster you heat it, the more likely your yogurt is going to turn out grainy. So we've now heated our milk to 160, stirring constantly. It's important that you're stirring while you're heating your milk so that none of the proteins cook and burn on the bottom. So we're going to take our thermometer out and we can take our milk off of the heat. You can either pour your milk into your jar at this point and let it cool there, or you can let your milk cool in the pot. Just be careful when you're pouring. We heated our milk to 160 and now we've cooled it down to 110 degrees and we're ready to add our packet. I like to give my packet a nice little shake to make sure that there's no powder close to the tear tabs that we'll lose. I'm going to tear it open and make sure you dump the whole packet in. I like to give my packet a little shimmy to make sure all of the powder gets out of the corners. We can then stir that in. Make sure that you give it time to hydrate and mix thoroughly. I usually do this by making sure that there are no small powdered pieces left on the side of my jar when I stir my milk. And this one looks good, looks about ready. Cover with a coffee filter and we're going to put this in our incubator for 5 to 12 hours. So here we're using our Broad and Taylor incubator and it's set at 115 degrees and we're going to set our yogurt in there and let it incubate. It's been 5 hours since we added our packet to our milk, so let's take a look on how it's thickening. There's a couple of different things you can do to judge the thickness or how cultured your product is. The first thing I like to do is just give it a little shake. You can tell that the milk is still really fluid by doing this, right? If we were to shake the jar and the milk was set, we wouldn't see that as much. So I can tell just from giving this jar a little shake that we're not seeing any lumps. The other thing you can do, if you would like to, is you can take a spatula or a spoon and you can run it through and you can see if any curd is forming. So you'll see chunks move and float, and you'll also see bits form to your spoon or spatula. Spoons are good for this because you can do the pull-out spoon test. You can also do the tilt test here, but because our milk is still so fluid, it's obviously not ready. So this is after 5 hours. We're going to let it go for the full 12. It's been 12 hours now, so let's take a look at our Greek yogurt activator. So, just like we did at the 5-hour mark, we're going to give it an initial shake to see if the milk is set. And it is, right? We don't have any movement in our milk. This is very clear that our culture has now set, which is perfect. When we give it a tilt, we can see it begin to pull away from the side of the jar, and that's a great example of the tilt test, and a great example of what your yogurt should look like when it is thick and ready to go. So this guy is ready. We're going to leave it out on the counter for 2 hours. This will help it cool it down before we put it in the fridge. Now that we've activated our yogurt, it's time to make our first batch. Remember, when you're making your batches, it's 1 tablespoon of starter culture to 1 cup of milk. We like to make 4 cups of milk with a 1/4 cup of starter. Let's get into it. We like to use the measurements on our jar. Remember, you can always use a measuring cup. We're gonna measure out some milk for ourselves. We're gonna pour it in. And remember to heat your milk slowly. The slower you heat your milk, the less likely it is to be grainy. And also stirring helps prevent proteins and sugars from browning and sticking to the bottom, so make sure you stir. We're gonna heat this pot to 160, just like we did our activator. Now that our milk has cooled to 110, we are ready to add our starter culture. Since we used 4 cups of milk, I'm going to use a 1/4 cup measuring cup to make our batch. So here's our good thick starter that y'all saw from our activator. We're going to take a 1/4 cup of that. You're welcome to stir it before you scoop your 1/4 cup, but we just scoop it right off the top, no problem. Dump that right in. Make sure you give it a good stir so that all of the culture doesn't settle to the bottom and it gets mixed in well. Now, this is going to incubate in your Broad and Taylor proofer or in your Euro cuisine. You can pour this jar into your individual jars. But remember, if you're using something like a Euro cuisine, you want to mix it in a big container first to make sure that all of the culture is evenly divided between all of your little jars. So this would be the time that you would add it to your Euro cuisine, but because we are going to be putting it in our Broad and Taylor proofer, it's fine just the way it is. So we're going to pop on our coffee filter and let it go for 5 to 8 hours. It's time to take a look at our first batch of yogurt. It's been about 5 hours. Let's see what it's looking like. So at this point, you should start to see a little bit of culture. Your yogurts may be ready if your house is on the warmer side, or you may have used a little bit more starter. But for us, I don't think we're quite there yet. Let me show you why. So when I give my jar the initial swirl and tilt, you can see that it's still very liquidy. It's still about to pour out the jar with just a little bit of tilt. Another good thing to do is you can always take a spoon to it. And if you just reach right into the top, you can see I have a very thin layer that still dribbles back in. So while you're seeing some culture forming and you're seeing some thickness, I definitely think it can go a little bit more. So we're gonna put the lid back on and let it go for the rest of the time. It's been 8 hours and we think our culture is ready. Let's take a look. I'm gonna peel back the top. So first thing I'm gonna do is my tilt test. So you can see when I tilt my jar, you can see how the yogurt pulls away from the jar. And you can also begin to see actually a little bit of whey forming. So Greek and sometimes Bulgarian are gonna have that whey formation because this is a thermophilic yogurt that is incubated, which is why we have things like our yogurt strainer, which are great for making it even thicker if you'd like. So once your yogurt gets thick like this and you start to see the whey, you can strain it, but you can also eat it as it is because it's great, it's thick. So let's take our spoon to it and see what we're actually dealing with. I'm gonna give it a nice little stir, pull some off the top. So you can see the difference from this one and our 5-hour one. So our 5-hour one, we didn't have any kind of hold of shape. We didn't have any structure. This one, you can see our yogurt chunks and you can see that structure, right? And when we plop it back in, it's not a steady stream, it's a nice drop of yogurt. That's how we know that our yogurt is good and thick and ready to go. So you can let this sit on your counter for 2 hours to cool down before putting it in the fridge. Once it's in the fridge for 6 hours, it's ready to eat. A few quick tips and tricks to be successful in making your thermophilic heirloom yogurts. The first thing we recommend is if you don't have the time or you're worried about how long it's going to take for you to cool your milk, do it in an ice bath in a metal container or in the pot that you cooked it in. That way you don't have to worry about breaking your jars, but that milk will cool a lot faster. Another thing to remember is to always save a little bit of your last batch for your next batch. Remember, the ratio is 1 tablespoon of yogurt starter to 1 cup of milk. You saw today we made 4 cups of milk, so we used 1/4 cup or 4 tablespoons of yogurt starter in that batch, and it turned out perfect. The last tip we have for you is don't freak out if your activator is a little runny. You saw our activator after 12 hours and it was perfectly set, but that's not always going to be the case. If your activator looks more like our 5-hour one at 12 hours, that's okay. The good cultures are still mixed in, and we strongly encourage you to use that in the same ratio to make another batch of yogurt. It can take 2 to 3 batches for you to see that full set that we see in our tilt tests. Now that we've made our thermophilic heirloom yogurts, let's take a look at our 2 different varieties. As we mentioned at the top of the video, we have both Bulgarian and Greek. The first yogurt we're going to look at is our Greek yogurt. This is one of our favorites because it always comes out super thick and creamy, but also has a really nice tangy flavor that you would associate with your Greek yogurt. As you can tell, this one is perfectly cultured. We're starting to see a little bit of whey come off the top of this jar, so this one's definitely ready for straining if we wanted to strain it, but I'm going to show you what it looks like without strain because I think this culture is perfect both ways. So you can see how thick this is after the fridge. This is the difference. If you remember seeing our 8 hours shot, it was a little bit taller than our 5 hours shot, but now we really have good chunk and height on our Greek yogurt, which is awesome. You can see how thick it is, and when we give it a nice, good stir, it will maintain that thickness. This yogurt is honestly great for any type of yogurt sauces, like tzatziki especially, obviously, but it's also just really great to eat, right? So we can make it thicker, we can almost make it like a cheese-like consistency if we're looking for more of a cream cheese mixture, but this one's just really great in general for cooking sauces, marinades, and also just straight up snacking. Our other heirloom thermophilic yogurt is our Bulgarian yogurt. This is also a great culture. It's a little bit more mild than our Greek yogurt, but still comes out very thick and creamy. Let's take a look. So right off the bat, we can see that this one has also started producing a little whey. We can strain it just like we would our Greek yogurt, but it's not as traditional for a Bulgarian style yogurt to be strained. It's more traditional for that whey to be mixed in. It'll still come out thick and creamy, I promise. Let's take a look. So right off the bat, when I take a scoop, we have a huge, tall, thick yogurt. This guy is absolutely great. Now let's see what happens when I stir it all together. Give it a nice stir. This one's still going to be super thick. Yep, so we still have good thickness. So you can tell that this one is a little bit thinner than our Greek yogurt, but still comes out very thick. This one is great to eat with fruits. We also love to use our Bulgarian yogurt for overnight oats. And that's it. With a packet of our yogurt starter culture and some milk, you too can make your own yogurt at home. There's so many things you can do with homemade yogurts, so check out the links below for recipes on our website. Also, please tag us as you're making your yogurts. We love seeing your TikToks, Instagram, and Facebook posts about your yogurt journey. Happy fermenting and keep learning.